Good afternoon, and welcome to today's program titled Consolidate and Future-Proof Your Medical Imaging Systems with VNA. I'm Rajiv Leventhal, Associate Editor for Healthcare Informatics Magazine. Today's program is sponsored by Perceptive Software. Thank you to our sponsor and to you and our audience for giving us your time and attention. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping details. Each window on your screen can be moved by clicking and dragging, or enlarge and minimize by clicking the icons in the top right corner of each window. Please use the Q&A area to the right of the slides to submit a question at any time. If you cannot see this area, simply click the red Q&A button. To download a copy of today's slides or other materials related to today's topic, please use the resources list located in the lower left of your screen. If you have technical issues during the program, please click the yellow help button to troubleshoot the issue. You can also tweet during today's webinar via the Twitter widget by clicking on the blue Twitter icon at the bottom of your screen. Simply click the Post and Authorize buttons to log into your Twitter account and begin sharing automatically at the event, hashtag HCI VNA system. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Phil Wasson, President and CEO for TriRivers, and Larry Sitka, Principal Solution Architect and Founder of Acuo Technologies for Perceptive Software. Phil Wasson is the President and CEO for TriRivers in Rockford, Illinois. TriRivers is a unique joint venture health IT organization of Swedish American Health System in Rockford and FHN in Freeport, Illinois. Phil has been involved in healthcare for over 20 years at the executive level. Larry Sitka founded Acuo Technologies, now part of Perceptive Software, in November 1999. Sitka's duties and responsibilities have included lead software engineer, sales and marketing, channel development and support, and strategy development and delivery. In addition, Sitka is an evangelist to the imaging industry, regularly authors articles and white papers, and speaks frequently at industry events and conferences. Prior to founding Acuo, Sitka served in senior engineering roles for Imation Corporation, 3M Medical Imaging Division, and AT&T Global Information Systems. Thank you both for taking the time to speak with us today. And with that, gentlemen, the audience is yours.
Well, thank you a lot, Rajiv. Appreciate the nice introduction. I will go ahead and get started. I'm Phil Wasson. I'm the CEO for TriRivers. Just to give you a little background of who we are, TriRivers is an organization which has been in existence now for just about 10 years. We're a joint venture health IT organization, originally founded to support two corporate parents on a variety of different software solutions. And during that period of time, we've migrated to actually developing our own telecommunications company. We own about 700 or 800 miles or so of private fiber in northern Illinois, and we have a joint venture and fiber sharing agreements with a variety of different groups, including Northern Illinois University, where we have an emerging affiliation with UW Health. And also we've sponsored with NIU a group called the Illinois Rural Health Net, which is 138 critical access hospitals which are connected via fiber on a 1 gig network in the state of Illinois. The bigger project that we've got going right now is a fiber connection project with a group in Wisconsin called WIN, which actually has about 3,600 miles of private fiber. And our goal here is to create a north-south data center presentation, one out of Rockford, Illinois, and one out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, so we could run our replicated content across those two data center locations. Now, we started our virtual our VNA imaging project actually almost prior to 2011, and we were stuck in a place where there was a lot of healthcare organizations were stuck here. We had a primary PACS vendor that we had been using since about 2003, and although that PACS vendor did radiology very well, we had issues associated with imaging modalities that were emerging that had to exist outside of the archive that existed on that system. So we had kind of these islands and these silos of data that we couldn't manage. It was difficult in terms of just migrating data from one platform to another. Our radiologists were anxious to make sure that our PACS system was appropriately replicated. They were concerned about what happens when that PACS system is down and how do they access studies. We didn't really have much archive functionality because the archive functionality in that model was really held hostage by the PACS vendor. And so that combined with a 40 to 50% year-to-year data growth model that we were having to manage, and having a lot of different storage area platforms coming in at a pretty fast pace, kind of made data migration a really costly effort because every time we had to change our PACS platform, or I should say our storage platforms, or we had to make a move in that area. And those of you who are managing storage know what I'm talking about because you can have storage requirements that occur every 3 to 4 to 3 to 5 years. So platforms change pretty drastically in that model. But we were having to go back to the PACS vendor at that time to acquire everything we needed to be able to make their system communicate on any new platform models we would acquire. So having to migrate the data was something that the PACS vendor had to do for us. And so it was costly. It was a data migration at the time was costing us anywhere between $300,000 and $400,000 on top of perhaps a storage area network buy of maybe $750,000. And so that combined with other factors just made our response to be able to do things quicker more difficult, and it made our response in terms of being able to support these different storage platforms quite difficult for us. We were introduced to the Accuo VNA product line at the time by EMC, and we were able to meet up with Larry, and he was able to help us out in terms of introducing us to this new way of thinking about how do you manage all of this data that you're acquiring. You know, certainly you have the storage capacity to do it, but moving it between these different storage platforms can be a real costly effort. So we had these pain points, and from a flexibility perspective, the ability to move those images around, the ability to replicate them so that you'd have those images available on a high availability platform. The ability to change to a lower cost storage tier that allowed you to push your images maybe to a lower cost storage tier that performed just as well. Who really owns that, in terms of how much it costs to move it around? So the image sharing challenges, just took a lot of flexibility off the table for us. And in terms of cost, every time you would do something different, you'd have to retrain people. Storage being incremental, maybe you'd have to live on old storage platforms that really, were beyond their useful life, leading to kind of this storage spread and disparate systems. Again, migrating the PACS data from one PACS vendor to another. So we were kind of stuck in this vicious life cycle where we kind of felt like the PACS vendor was kind of holding all of our data hostage, and we wanted to take ownership and control of that. And as a result of that, we wanted to improve our performance. We wanted to improve it in terms of how fast we could get to the data. How can we use the data in a way to query it for different things? We are also implementing an HIE in Northern Illinois, so how do we incorporate things like XDSI, which is a way to access images through an HIE component, and really not having any of that flexibility combined with that cost was really impacting our full performance. So we were looking for ways to increase performance and flexibility, but do that in a way that really reduced the total cost of ownership for us. So our business objectives were that we needed a tool. We needed a software tool that could help us match against our hardware capacity, that would allow us to use pretty much any kind of hardware storage solution that we chose to go after, as a target for all of this imaging data that we were collecting on a 40 to 50% year-over-year growth rate, and which we still are. And so we wanted a neutral solution that we could work on with all of our imaging solutions. I mean, so that we could get to a point in the process where we didn't care what kind of imaging solution a department might be choosing to make. We have a way to index that solution properly through DICOM, and then a way to capture that image, store it in the solution, and then actually be able to read it and view it directly from the archive. A part of that would be, we wanted to implement this replication strategy. Every time we would go back and talk about a replicated archive with our PACS vendor at the time, we were facing another $300,000 or $400,000 cost because there was a application interface that was needed because there was a different platform at the recovery site. So we wanted this flexibility. We wanted neutrality within the software products we were going to use to manage the data, and we wanted it vendor independent so that vendors felt comfortable enough with the solution that they could work with it. And that hopefully improves our overall data management and then reduces our costs, and especially around the cost of migrations. I think since about 2011, we've probably done 3 to 5 migrations, and if migrations are costing $300,000 to $350,000 a pop, there's $1 million of cost reductions as a result of being able to do your own migrations. In terms of our stages of data recovery, during all this time we were working on ways to reduce our time to recovery and reduce essentially reduce how long it took a backup to occur. And so, we were in a place where a lot of people were at where we were doing a lot of traditional tape recovery, and since then we've moved to more of a primary storage solution, where today we kind of operate in this area where we're doing our primary backup solutions are disk to disk using different appliances. And because we have a fiber network, we actually have those appliances distributed across 4 to 5 different locations. And then the other thing we wanted to get to is eventually get to a point where we could automate the site recovery and work on ways to reduce the time to recovery. So this is something we're still working on, but however, it's the Perceptive Accio VNA is the solution that kind of is leading the area in this. Today we have a replicated content archive running at 2 different sites, 28 miles apart from each other. And if one of the archives goes down, the solution is go to the other archive. And so that's available to be tested, and it works very well for us. So our future plans is to migrate that into a north kind of south data recovery strategy where we can actually put that 200 miles away. And so we're working on methods to try to do that as well. So if you think about what a vendor-neutral archive is, and this is where I might have Larry help chime in a little bit on with us, but with a true vendor-neutral archive, what we're doing is we're centralizing the medical imaging into one standards-based repository. And so regardless of the solution being used to capture the images out there, either from pathology or radiology or wherever, cardiology, it's all being sent to a single standards-based repository. And that repository in our model is replicated to another repository. And so this really helps to provide a lot more universal access. You can put one enterprise viewer on this, with the enterprise viewer capable of viewing this data directly from the archive, literally going around the PACS system. So the PACS system can be fully down, and the archive, the viewing system is actually accessing any of those images from the archive directly. So it really does provide a lot more ownership and control, and that was one of our big business drivers here, is we really wanted to take ownership and control of the data that we felt belonged to us. And so that's where the one standards-based repository really did a nice job of helping us.
one thing that I would add, Phil, is that if you look at a VNA and what a VNA actually provides, the low-hanging fruit, right, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, is really in radiology and cardiology. But the VNA and our implementation that we have for you is really a platform to actually extend across the unified content platform. So in other words, the ability to store not just some ology content in, but all the enterprise content management component in and in through XDS into the system, so that it can become managed, by a standards-based implementation. So a plan for the ability to ingest information, a plan to manage the information, and a plan to carry it forward into the future.
So as we kind of look at this from an application perspective in terms of a layering perspective, and Larry and I had talked about this slide before we started, but there's a lot of information on this slide. Obviously, we are a big EMC shop for the most part. We have multiple tiers of EMC storage. We actually have 4 tiers that we're managing today, and our tier storage costs run anywhere between somewhere in the area of $6.50 per gig downwards to about 16 cents per gig, depending on the performance we need from that particular storage tier. But if you think about what we're trying to do here is we're trying to take and image enable as many of our applications as possible. So we're pushing image enablement down almost as a layer, a software layer that we want to use. And then we're pushing those things up and then bringing radiology, oncology, and cardiology in on top of that to actually put a tool that helps control the access to those things, kind of as a platform upon which you're going to access these images. So one of the problems we've historically have had with different PACS systems is that if you think about this storage management software that's at the bottom, the various different tiers of storage that would be available, as those tiered storage platforms, they usually have to be replaced every 3 to 5 years, or they have to be modified. And what we were trying to avoid here, and one of the things that really saved us probably at least another couple $100,000 every time this situation would occur, is every time we would change one of our tiers, change from one particular legacy storage platform to another, have to migrate that off to another platform, and then having to go to the PACS vendor and then find whatever API the PACS vendor had for file access to that new system. I mean, those APIs were costing us anywhere between $75,000 to $150,000 a piece. So we were able to also avoid that kind of cost, because one of the huge benefits of a VNA in the model that we have is any storage target, even a PC, could be a storage target for a VNA. And so the VNA provides all the standard APIs necessary to work within any storage target capable solution you acquire. I can tell you that one of the storage targets on this slide, Isilon, for instance, is an object-based storage platform from EMC that actually came out, was popular among to actually host very large files, and it actually kind of came out of the movie industry. And one of the things we had to do is Accio actually worked directly with EMC in terms of providing for a standard API that works great with Isilon, and they had to package that up and provide that as part of their solution for us. But EMC was able to benefit as well with that because it made the Isilon platform very functional from the perspective of being able to use that lower cost platform that actually performs very well within this model. I don't know, Larry, you got any comments on this slide you can share?
Yeah, so this is what the platform really brings to play is the abstraction or the virtualization of storage sitting underneath, breaks apart the application sitting above. So anytime you get an abstraction or virtualization that sits in between, it creates a commodity, and a commodity for the assets that it's supporting, whether it being physical infrastructure or being applications sitting above. When you get a commodity and you turn things out for bid and you isolate them, that gives the ability then to create competition. And whenever you have competition inside a solution, the cost goes down.
Okay, let's go on. Let's give you a real-world example of something that here happened recently. We had both of our hospitals migrated off of merge to a product called DR Systems, and we had to come up with a methodology by which DR Systems was going to work and play nice with the Accio archive, VNA archive. And although this is a pretty bad slide, if you think about these as modalities over here, one of our objectives was to push the study into the VNA and then create a temporary archive, what we call a temporal archive, in the VNA that would support our downtime requirements. That way, if our system went down but the radiology image hadn't been processed yet through DR Systems, the radiology image was still available. And in fact, the modalities can still send to the Accio VNA first, even though the DR system PACS might be impacted. And then, so we were able to put the Accio archive in an adjacent format to the DR system, where Accio kind of functions as a temporary archive, holding a temporary file until that file gets processed through the PACS process, comes back, is stored up, but then all of that data is accessible through an image server from a company called eUnity is a product we use, and eUnity actually accesses images directly from the archive itself. So that way the PACS system can be completely down here, but we can literally be totally operational using the eUnity viewer. So that was one of our big objectives with our radiologists, because if PACS were down, we had to have an alternative way. And since this archive exists at two different sites, even one of these archives could be down. So we can route to one archive in Freeport, 28 miles away, images if the DR system is down in the Rockford market. And then when when the system were to come back up in Rockford, the archives replicate with each other and get caught up. So it was a real good way to be able to keep a permanent copy of everything that we captured within our PACS environment.
And one thing, Phil, that I wanted to add on that before you leave that slide is there's this has been in production for roughly almost 5 years now. It is unique in that it's probably the first instance most of the audience, on this WebEx is actually seeing, where you have something that literally sits in between the modalities and the PACS system. So it gives the flexibility to isolate the PACS as Phil's describing, but it also gives the ability to do some automated information, right? Automated prefetching, automated post-fetch, automated data cleansing, automated routing, QC checks against, the order, prepositioning of orders, pre-compression, just lots of advantages, but more importantly, it demonstrates that, VNA or Unified Content Platform technology doesn't stop at the data center, right? It actually happens embedded inside of the workflow, and when you get embedded inside of the workflow, you actually take full control and full advantage of your data. And that's really the key to what this platform brings to you.
Good, I'll move on then. Our business value propositions. Essentially, our major one here was we wanted to do some migration avoidance on our infrastructure upgrades or PACS changes that had to be mitigated by the vendor. So this open systems architecture, which is really what a VNA is, provides us what we call a never again migration. And so the ability to do that ourselves reduces our cost. The return is that we can support new archiving and storage technologies that reduce our costs. We can do our own prefetching, our own compression. We can set up multi-point routing capabilities. These are all things that we went to the PACS vendor historically before 2011 to get. It improves our business continuity. It improves our high availability of these systems. It supports things like a method that logically and physically organizes the data. So these were all the business value propositions. We're still finding them. As we get into the HIE development is when we start to talk about imaging things like studies that could be distributed through an HIE. There's still more and more business value propositions that are emerging here. In the area of operation, yeah, go ahead.
One thing, Phil, that's very unique to what you've done within the organization is you've actually taken your IT organization, which used to be seen as a capital or sunk cost, and now are offering up as a for-profit type of service, correct?
Yep, we're doing some of that, yeah. And most of it is around infrastructure right now, fiber infrastructure, but we're also building a Tier 3 data center. But certainly could within the HIE function, could provide hosted solutions around some of these things for other groups. The operational value proposition, this gave us an enterprise strategy on how this data was going to be managed. It provided us with a little bit more control and scalability, and it improved the ability to really put a strategy around how this data needed to be controlled and accessed and managed. And then from the clinical value proposition, it really provided us with a lot more flexibility in terms of how these imaging applications are brought into these organizations. It provided us with a way to maintain the data use across multiple versions of different PACS systems that might emerge. And so we have a common copy of our PACS imaging studies that actually go back now almost 9 to 10 years in terms of how much data is being stored. So these were things that were important to our providers and our radiologists, and they were certainly things that were important as we address how we're going to operate these things in the future.
Phil, what did you see the impact in terms of when you went live, right? What was the impact? What was the impact to the users? What was the impact to the physicians?
When we originally went live, the physicians didn't really see much of an impact. I mean, it operated like the PACS system, except that what we were doing was we were prefetching from a vendor-neutral archive, and for the most part, the physicians didn't see much of an impact. It took us a little while to get our enterprise viewer in place, which is a product from a company called eUnity. We've struggled with the viewer solution that the PACS vendor provides us. We showed the eUnity product to a group of physicians at the Swedish American location, actually getting that live going right now. They can't wait to get it. I mean, it solved a lot of problems for us. It essentially is a viewer that accesses the images directly from PACS. It doesn't, or directly from the archive. Doesn't impact PACS at all. And it really kind of runs like a YouTube video. So, if you've got a study that's got 1,500 images in it and it's a CT study, that study can start to compile and show images as soon as the first few, the images start to get received. So that was the kind of viewer we were kind of waiting for. Where historically, if you had a study that had 800 images, you probably had to wait until all 800 images had been transferred down to the local desktop to be able to actually view some of those images. So from that perspective, it's really improved our lives, and I think it's going to improve the lives of our providers because they're going to be able to access this thing regardless of what's happening in the radiology department.
Perfect. Thank you, Phil. So I'm Larry Sitka. I'm a founder and principal solution architect for Perceptive. I wanted to, inside of the slides, I wanted to just keep it very simple. What I wanted to do, and there's actually going to be a white paper that actually will be produced in terms of something that I call the walk, the run, the fly strategy for implementing the VNA. What I frequently see is every single site that I go into, every time I roll out one of these solutions and we go into this, we see a quick wanting to, shall I say, incorporate anything and everything into the system on day one. And you're really changing out. It's like I correlate going to a VNA or a unified content platform, right, with changing out the plumbing in your house without ripping out a wall, without changing the faucets, and damn it, every time I turn the faucet on, I get hot water, right? So you have to be able to maintain that. When you go live with this and you roll out this type of system or solution, you must make sure you do not disrupt the business value to the enterprise. What is the business value? It's the clinician and the physician, right? All this stuff that we're doing is typically seen as capital or sunk cost. We need to provide better optimized solutions along with a methodology that carries us forward to reproduce the solution, not just under the DICOM-based environment, but also in other environments. You'll see, as we were acquired by Perceptive, we've seen enterprises, every enterprise that we go into, we saw silos of data sitting underneath these isolated PACS systems. The same thing is true inside the ECM-based environment, right? We're seeing silos of information stuck under applications that all have the same problems, the same issues. So what we believe we've come up with at Perceptive is a means for creating a platform or creating a bus that delivers image or object access to the information. It provides, a leverage into the system with migration tools. And more importantly, part of being vendor neutral means you can leave the system and you can leave the system for free. So every system that we install comes with a built-in migration tool that allows you, the end user, to own your data, to take advantage of your data, but also be able to get out from underneath, our platform if you so choose. So inside the strategy that we go forward with, right, again, call it a walk, a run, a fly, the key thing to starting out, of course, everybody goes through the RFP, there's this excitement, everybody talks about, how do we move this forward? And then the strategy for moving it forward is identifying what I call, a team of key stakeholders, right? Clinical, IT, and physician access that allows information into the system and allows the ability for users to actually manage and maintain that system, take ownership. We're going to provide the tools for the organization such that the organization can take complete advantage and leverage the system in itself. I frequently say that an organization, right, will teach me how to use the software that I help create, which is very unique. That's what you actually want, so inside of it. But inside the walk philosophy, right, plan for the migrations, right? You're going to have much more than one. They can be and are very time-consuming. Plan appropriately. Determine if there's a temporary migration storage or type of requirement, and train the VNA platform administrators so that they're involved right up front, involved with our implementation team, taking advantage, and then they should be able to take ownership inside the system. Once you commence your first migration, and once net new studies are actively going into the system, obviously not everything is stored into the system. So the ability then to share or cross-share information through set of federated services are also a requirement inside of the walk phase. In the run phase, you have all new content now from all other ologies actually going into the VNA system, but then allow for the integration of all those content to be shared between the entities. And I typically call this the taking data in from a source, creating a canonical form of information sitting on the disk, a known state of information that your organization is managing and maintaining. Not the VNA vendor's form, not the VNA standard, but the standard that's known to the organization. When you have a known state of information, it's very easy to push that information to another destination in the form that is required by that application that's destined for. So the other component inside of this is begin to understand in terms of migrations will never go away, no matter what. So, and I view migrations from three different principles. One is migrations from disk to disk, which Phil talked about. The second one was application to application, which Phil talked about. And then, but the third one that is pretty much yet to hit, but we see it every time when we look at, information that's been stored for 20 years in the disk, and that is what I call the tech refresh of the data. So those three migrations, meaning if you tech refresh the data, you have to have the ability to inject information into it so that not only do you support the old application that actually generated it, but you support any net new application that becomes in the future or becomes affiliated with the data in the future or wants access to the data in the future. So being able to carry that forward is actually the three types of migration. It's the cost that goes away. But more importantly now, the platform actually provides the tools to do that. On the fly side, now once you understand the data, once you understand and take ownership of the data, once you understand the platform in itself and how to leverage it and how to use it, now you can really take off. Now you can actually take and incorporate the next step, which is all the non-DICOM content inside of your enterprise. Right? And what I mean by non-DICOM content, it can be patient-centric content, meaning stored through XDS registry repository services, or it can mean other content, right? Back office type of content. It can mean HR. It can mean EOB. It can mean document management. But consolidate all that entire infrastructure that currently has its own DR plan. It's the same issue. It's the same problem that we saw inside the PAC systems can now be leveraged and supported inside the platform in itself. So as we're seeing inside of this fly, we're seeing what we would classify as a deconstruction of the PACs, right? None of the functionality is actually going away, or none of the requirements are going away. It's just being separated out, right? So you have three layers in essence. You have the archive or image management component, right, which is being solved by the content platform or by the VNA. You have worklist and workflow, right, which is the next level up. And then you have the unified viewer component. What we're discovering is unified viewers are very specific to the specialty that they're supporting. So one group may want one enterprise viewer, another group may want a different viewer. The referring market is completely different. So the ability to select and cross-balance, cross-organization, any type of viewer that you want. More importantly, it doesn't mean, even though the data has been stored in DICOM, it may not be retrieved through DICOM, right? These viewers are getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and that's fantastic in terms of their ability to actually work or function out on side a peripheral edge of a network. More importantly, all those silos, as they come into play, right, begin the aggregation, begin a migration plan, and it becomes a repetitive process, meaning you just take another silo of information and you follow the philosophy of walk, run, fly. So how do you know when success really happens? So a key indicator from my perspective, and the one I love the most, is when a VNA goes live, the users don't know it even happened. And it was a loaded question that I actually presented to Phil. I wanted to hear his response in terms of when the platform goes live, again, you just ripped out the entire plumbing and slipped everything underneath. We want business to continue to function, right? We want to make sure that you have the business revenue out of the physicians and out of the clinicians. The second point is, the interoperability between
Larry, just a comment on that. I didn't even know you were going to ask that question. I thought it was kind of a trick question because, nothing did happen when we put everything on the VNA. The users didn't even know. We had to tell them we were going to do it, but nothing ever happened. So I was I forgot sometimes you ask that question of people. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. I didn't even know that was coming.
That's okay, no problem. Interoperability between the disparate applications. What used to cause a physician to have to change rooms or change desktops or RDP to other systems, that now goes away because now the physician sits down at one common desktop using one common tool to provide a direct interface, crossology, cross-enterprise, cross-PACS, even cross-region, let me call it that, right? Cross-PID schema, right? The platform gives you the ability to actually make the exchange of information and gives it clinical relevance back to the requester, per the requester, so that the information from that organization is known to the system translates it, and then brings it back in that form. No hidden migration costs. Again, the tools to migrate, they're inside the system for use by the individual users, and again, more importantly, if you don't like, what the platform does for you, it should provide a free migration outbound. Again, stop paying for these migrations. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. The platform unification of both DICOM and non-DICOM content, again, this is the merging of the enterprise under healthcare, right? Being to consolidate information that is not, it's outside even the ology range. In other words, ECM plus VNA, yields what I call a unified content platform. Once you have unification of the system, you can now then leverage existing applications that go out and grab more context to the information, right? And then append the context of that information into the actual objects that are being stored under the system. In other words, like a learn mode, like a search mode, the ability to acquire information and save it with the information, bringing it more up to date as it's discovered over time. So the next step, or should I say the final benefit, is you're ready to add the other departments. You're ready to bring them on. You've taken full ownership of the data. And the one thing that we don't want to have happen is we don't want you to come back for professional services engagements. Right? We want you to take full ownership of the information and management of the resources. Right? Complete data liquidity and complete management of the information as you own your data. So with that, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you both again for an excellent presentation. We will now be taking questions from our audience, and I can see we do have a number of questions that have come in already. Just a reminder to the audience, please click on the red Q&A widget at the bottom of your player console to submit a question, and we will try to get to as many questions as possible. So our first question is from the audience is, what has the impact been on costs for storage and infrastructure?
Most of the impact from a cost perspective has been in the fact that we've been able to insource our migration costs. At the same time, we've been able to avoid having to acquire unique APIs for different storage platforms that have emerged over the last 5 years or so. Because Accio has all the tools for our own people to do migrations, we can schedule those migrations and conduct those migrations ourselves with very little impact on the end users, and also we can with very little support from Accio itself. So we're able to do migrations across different storage platforms. We're able to do migrations across different different PACS applications if they change. And as I've said, I think we've probably done 4 or 5 migrations in the last 4 years or so, because it's just a standard of having to live on with all this data. You're going to migrate from one platform to another. A platform's going to a storage platform is going to go out of use. It's going to have an end of life time period. You're going to have to deal with moving it around. So that's been most of it. The other thing is, because we can migrate easily from say, a Tier 1 platform to a Tier 3 platform, we can experiment with moving images and studies that to different tiers that might be less expensive per gigabyte to be able to operate from. An example was, historically we might have operated our packs from a SCSI volume in terms of going back 5 to 7 years or so. Today, we have 4 different platforms, the most expensive being around $7 per gig, the cheapest being around 53 cents per gig. And so we can move the images where they need to go. We can even split them. We can say, well, these images that don't get accessed very often, we're going to stick those on a lower tier of storage. It might not have the performance that we want, but we don't go after those images that often. So there's things we can do in terms of the storage targets that allow us to migrate to new storage targets relatively easily.
So one thing that I might want to add to Phil's comments is that I've actually seen sites from the physical storage infrastructure, right, I've seen sites actually move to new storage on a every 3-year basis. And they do this with the expectation they will never pay support and maintenance again on storage. So rather than put money into support and maintenance, they just purchase net new storage, run it under warranty, and then migrate the data. It's become that efficient to actually do and implement.
Right. The way we look at storage costs these days is we think of it as like a utility cost. And so we budget it and manage it like a utility cost. I mean, if you don't have enough storage to store your EMR data to or your PACS information to, you're going to close your doors tomorrow anyway. So it's like having electricity. It's like having water. So we budgeted, and our board that we work with recognizes that our storage is just another utility, just like the electric bill is. But you also want to be able to migrate to storage platforms that are supportable. And these storage platforms, the technology is very disruptive, so it changes rapidly. So you have to have a way to move this data around. Next question.
Our next question from the audience, since you already had EMC storage in place, how did you weigh the pros and cons of going with Perceptive Acuo for their VNA solution as opposed to EMC itself?
Well, EMC really doesn't have a VNA. EMC actually brought Acuo's solution to the table because we were asking for a better way to manage our PACS information back in around 2009. And so EMC, you can migrate data using EMC software, but you can't do it in a disruptive way like you can with a VNA. The VNA is really a piece of software that runs on the storage. So, but to my knowledge, there really isn't a VNA solution that EMC offers. EMC tends to work with vendors in the VNA space.
To add to that, the other thing that we've discovered is the traditional implementations is, the PACS vendors will see storage as an end result, right, as a place to just dump the data and then they're done with it. We approach storage as just a life cycle of where the information actually resides. So we took on the ability, rather than using appliances to interface to those devices, we took on the native APIs for the different storage organizations, right, that exist out there. The performance that, we see inside of their native APIs are very close to nearline disk performance, but yet the cost per terabyte is dramatically less. Next question.
Great. Next question. What have you built to integrate VNA to radiology, cardiology, and non-radiology cardiology with Epic or HIS?
In terms of just being able to integrate, be able to access images from the various, we actually support 2 HIS vendors right now, or EMR vendors, actually multiple ones. But Meditech and Epic are the ones that we have running. The Meditech and Epic systems actually access the viewer directly through an HTTPS interface, and so we just have the enterprise viewer sitting out there, and that's the solution for both Epic and Meditech. So with the Epic and Meditech integration, you just give them the pointer, and there's an HTTPS message that goes across with the patient information embedded within it to open up the right PACS set of studies for that particular study you might be accessing within the EMR. So there's really nothing you have to build. The interfaces are available from the vendors.
Great, thank you. Next question. Can you talk about the universal viewer in regards to use by a clinician which generated an asset versus use by a clinician who consumes that asset? And the scenario is radiologist versus ENT surgeon, or an image the ENT physician order and had read.
The radiologists today in our environment are using the viewer that's supplied by the PACS vendor, mainly because the enterprise-wide viewer today that we're using from eUnity does not yet have some of the 3D rendering that's needed, as well as some of the FDA compliance with being able to view it and do diagnostic capable viewing on those images. The enterprise viewer is designed as a low-end kind of viewer that a non-radiologist would access and be able to use. So pretty much providers that have access to patient information can access any of the images that might exist in the VNA. So if it's a modality for if it's a regular CT modality or MRI or whatever the case may be, they're able to access that image using the enterprise viewer. And it's just that the radiologists today, they might use the enterprise viewer, they like the enterprise viewer, but they're not using it for their diagnostic reads. I think over time that'll change as eUnity starts to deliver a diagnostic capable component to their viewer. And that would give the radiologist an alternative to using the PACS viewer that comes with DR systems in our environment.
One thing that I wanted to add to Phil's comments also are that whoever asked that question really hit the nail right on the head. They're starting to see that if you're going to really support any ology, this isn't just a DICOM archive, right? It isn't just ECM-based, storage of objects. This is a unified content platform that allows you to store and manage any content inside of the system, right? So one common place. The traditional implementations that you'll see out there is they'll give you a view that actually has, it appears that it's one, but it's really two physically separated systems, one being DICOM, one being non-DICOM. What we provide, right, is a unified view using one single based archival system, one single approach. So everything that you're gaining in terms of the migration components and the benefits inside the system for the DICOM world automatically apply inside of the non-DICOM world. So, and I'm thinking that the question was also asked in terms of, in one case, there's radiology and cardiology, there is a workflow. In the case of non-DICOM, traditionally, there is not a workflow. And you'll see part of the acquisition that we had of PACS Gear inside of Perceptive, is solving some of that acquisition, solution or problem for us. The ability to dip into the VNA for some of the demographics, the ability to listen to HL7, right, so that they can pick up a pick list rather than have to type in information. So again, bringing the data in and storing the data is really the easy part, but creating a wrapping context around it and also adding context to the information over time is what we're doing inside of the platform.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. You mentioned implementing an HIE. For an HIE, one of the biggest challenges with medical images seems to be community viewing. How big of a component is VNA to this?
What we're planning to do, we actually have two HIEs we're working on. One is a Wisconsin-based private HIE, and the other one is in Northern Illinois. What we're doing is, in Wisconsin, there's a lead provider in that state that already has a XDSI-compatible virtual neutral archive. We don't anticipate that we're going to ask them to replace that. We have a VNA for Illinois that we're using, and then there might be others that would have a VNA or an archive for PACS as well. What we would ask them to do is enable that for XDSI, and then we'll publish a manifest into the HIE that makes the viewing capable. But then we still haven't worked out what the workflow for that's going to look like yet, and so we're just starting to dialogue that now in terms of how we would make that workflow functional. We'll probably need a viewer that functions at the HIE level for sites that don't have a viewer. That is kind of a default viewer that launches when a provider who's authorized to see the image on a community basis wants to look at it. And then there might be situations where a site has a viewer, but they just want to access the data so they can view it in their viewer. So we're working around all those issues right now. But our approach, though, is everything will be IHE profile enabled in our model. So that's why we're focusing, go ahead and get the XDSI capable profiles installed to your VNA, and we've done that. So, and we're asking other people who would want to participate in an early trial of that to do the same thing.
To add to that, Phil, it's not really a technology issue anymore. I mean, if you look at the way the platform, the VNA-based platform rolls out, it's not a centralized system. It's decentralized, meaning it's a grid-based technology. So it functions very well in disconnected, intermittent and high latency type of environments. What the biggest challenge, I believe, for an HIE is A, how to make money on it, right? And B, how does a CIO not share all its private patient information with its competition? Those are the only two challenges I believe that I see inside the HIEs in terms of what they need to solve and how they need to solve it. From a technology perspective, it's now very easy to provide secure interregional access between those different locations.
Great, and I think we actually have time for one more quick one from the audience. What data types, file formats are supported today? For example, PDF, Word docs, DICOM, etc.
Yup, and yup. So, I mean, one of the beauties of using an XDS-based technology to manage patient-centric information is it's pretty much agnostic to the file type or file extensions, right, that you're putting into it. I used to walk over to, one of the primary developers that's working on it, and I'd see MPEGs, I'd see JPEGs, I'd see TIFFs, I'd see WAV files, I'd see, Word docs, Excel docs. So, and as long as you can wrap patient context around the information and store that into the system, there was even a case for the Department of Defense was looking for what they called a .raw format, meaning we were going to just manage the information with some context, knowing nothing about the file format. So just having the ability to check it in and check it out through XDS, or having the ability to create, we also offer the ability to use or leverage a web service-based interface and go natively into the system. So again, extending the platform far beyond just for what it's normally thought of in terms of radiology and cardiology and DICOM. It's so much more.
Well, in the HIE world, if everything was based on technology, this would be a day at the beach. You got
Yep.
ownership, you've got different feelings of, why should I participate in this one or that one? You got the cost associated with it. You got the government not being very clear on what their requirements are going to be at any given time. And then, of course, you got the legal requirements around doing this across state lines and such. So, like I said, if it was all if it was all associated with technology, we'd have this done by now.
Great. Well, everybody, I think that's all the time we have for questions today. Should you have any more, please reach out to the presenters, and they will reply to you. I want to thank Phil Wasson and Larry Sitka so much once again for an excellent presentation. I would also like to thank our sponsor, Perceptive Software, for making today's program possible. Finally, thank you to you and our audience for participating today. We'll hope you join us in the future for another Healthcare Informatics webinar. And this concludes today's presentation.